The boarding pass hit the floor with a cold, slicing sound. Rebecca Sloane did not tear it, but the way she dragged a straight line of her finger across Alyssa Carter's ticket froze the entire first-class cabin in place. A small gesture, yet sharp enough to say what she did not dare speak aloud. "You do not belong here." Alyssa stood still, one hand resting on her 7-month pregnant belly, feeling every uneasy thump of the baby shifting inside. The white overhead lights cast down on her face, highlighting the exhaustion and the strange discomfort she had felt ever since she stepped through the boarding gate. She knew that look. The look of people who believed luxury was a privilege reserved for only a certain kind of person. And clearly, Alyssa was not included. Rebecca tilted her head, her smile stiff like a mask carved into the face of a flight attendant, trained for years to hide disdain beneath politeness. "Sit in your correct seat, ma'am, and do not create more trouble." Her voice was soft but cutting, just loud enough to hear, just sharp enough to insult. Alyssa looked down at her ticket. 2A. Clear. Correct. Exact. Nothing wrong. Yet Rebecca still stood blocking the seat like a living door refusing to open, and that was the moment the invisible camera of fate began to record. First class looked perfect on the surface, charcoal leather seats, gentle lighting, the soft sound of luggage wheels gliding like a whisper. But something else crept through the air, invisible but sharp, like cold metal brushing the skin. Prejudice. Alyssa inhaled slowly. She had seen too many moments like this in her life, enough to know she was about to step into a small battle on a very public stage, with many spectators ready to believe the wrong person. The silence stretched tight like a string about to snap. "I am standing exactly where I am supposed to be," Alyssa said, her voice calm with a poised firmness. Not loud, not angry, but sharp, like a knife placed on a table. Rebecca's eyes dropped to her belly, then returned to her face. The doubt in them shifted into something colder. "Well, I will check again." She turned on her heel, her shoes clicking sharply against the floor. The imaginary camera panned across her back and then returned to Alyssa's face, still holding steady but with unease rising inside. She was pregnant. She was tired. She just wanted to sit down, buckle her seatbelt, drink some water, and rest. Yet because of her skin color and her swollen belly, the world seemed determined to test her one more time. A soft sigh came from a nearby seat. A middle-aged man, Richard Coleman, glanced up at the scene, then immediately buried himself in his laptop, as if it could shield him from involvement. Others looked at Alyssa, then quickly turned away, so no one would think they cared. Typical first-class behavior: everyone sees, no one stands up. Rebecca returned. "This seat is yours," she said, the word sounding more like an accusation than confirmation. "But next time, prepare clearer documents." Clearer documents. Alyssa had no time to respond before Rebecca stepped aside, though the look on her face made it obvious Alyssa's presence was an inconvenience she did not intend to hide. Alyssa sat down in 2A, buckled her seatbelt, and tried to steady her breathing. Her belly tightened again with a small jolt of pain. Braxton Hicks, she reminded herself, still manageable. But the unease lingered like a dark shadow. Across the cabin, Daniel Brooks, a social justice photojournalist, watched quietly. He did not intervene. He did not take a picture. He simply observed. But his gaze was sharp, the kind of gaze that recognized the scent of something wrong. He saw it clearly. A pregnant black woman treated like a problem despite standing in the right place. A senior flight attendant who thought her uniform gave her the right to belittle a vulnerable passenger. A first-class cabin, silent in the most cowardly way, silent to protect their own comfort. Rebecca went back to serving the other passengers with a smile Alyssa had never received. Champagne for the white passengers, friendly chatter, soft tone, perfect hospitality. But when Rebecca turned toward Alyssa again, the smile vanished. "What would you like before takeoff?" Her voice was cold, stripped of warmth. "Water, thank you," Alyssa replied. "I need to take my vitamins. I will see what I can do. See what I can do." 2 words that promised nothing but deliberate delay. 15 minutes passed. No water. Alyssa pressed the call button. The light above her turned on. Rebecca walked past, looked at the light. Did not stop. Did not answer. The invisible wall rose again. Alyssa swallowed the feeling of being ignored. She pressed the button a second time. Rebecca approached. "What do you need now? I still have not received my water. We are preparing for takeoff. You will have to wait." "But the man over there just got more champagne," Alyssa asked calmly. "That is a service priority," Rebecca replied, switching off the call button before walking away. Alyssa's belly tightened again, harder this time. Not just discomfort. A warning. She was being pushed into a dangerous situation. The plane taxied toward the runway. The cabin dimmed. The seatbelt sign lit up. Everyone settled in. But inside, Alyssa alarms were blaring. Dehydration, no medication, stress, prejudice, and a senior attendant treating her like a burden. She placed a hand on her belly. "It is okay, baby," she whispered silently. "Mommy can handle it." But deep down, she knew this was no longer about thirst, not about attitude, not about one rude flight attendant. This was a miniature society where power, prejudice, and silence merged to crush those who seemed easy to ignore. And what no one on that flight knew was that they had chosen the wrong person. Very wrong. Because in just a few hours, the woman they dismissed, insulted, and ignored would become the center of a storm that would shake all of North Star Airlines. And the man waiting for her call, Ethan Carter, was not just her husband. He was the new owner of the entire airline Rebecca Sloan worked for. A slap had not happened yet, but it was coming. And when it came, it would open the door for the whole world to see that real power does not come from a uniform or a fake smile or the privilege of a first-class seat. It comes from the truth. And the truth was about to hit record. Rebecca brushed past again, this time deliberately letting her shoulder skim the edge of Alyssa's seat, as if to remind her that her presence was intruding on the sanctity of this first-class space. The curve of Alyssa's pregnant belly pressed against the fabric, forcing her to steady her breathing, but it did nothing to dull the cold precision in her gaze as she watched Rebecca's every movement. She was not unfamiliar with being dismissed, but this particular flavor of contempt was nothing new. It had followed her from high-rise boardrooms in Chicago to simple coffee shops where people felt entitled to judge her with just a passing glance. The only difference today was that she was tired, she was hurting, and she needed water. Rebecca returned wearing the expression of someone about to confront a tedious task. "You pressed the call button again." Alyssa held back the rising irritation. "I am starting to have contractions. I need water. I need to take my medication." Rebecca's eyes flicked to her belly, but instead of concern, a faint curl of annoyance tugged at her mouth. "You have to wait. We have procedures." Procedures. The word dropped like a sentence. Procedures meant to hide reluctance, bias, and unfairness. Procedures applied only to people they did not consider important. Alyssa understood that better than anyone. The next contraction arrived faster, stronger. A tightening like a rope pulled hard around her abdomen, squeezing her breath in sharp, controlled bursts. Alyssa closed her eyes and breathed through the pain. When she opened them again, Daniel Brooks in the row behind her was watching. Not with pity, not with curiosity, but with the recognition of someone who had witnessed injustice unfold countless times. Daniel lifted his camera slightly, a reflex born of his work. Alyssa noticed the movement. Their eyes met for a single second. Just one. But enough to let Alyssa know that if anything happened, someone would capture the truth. Truth always needed a witness who knew what they were seeing. The plane reached cruising altitude. The cabin light softened, but instead of comfort, the first-class cabin felt even more suffocating. Luxury could not mask the social hierarchy, etched into every gesture, every glance, every silence. A sudden, sharper spasm rippled across Alyssa's abdomen, forcing her to grip the armrest. This one lasted longer, deeper. She bit her lower lip to stop a sound from escaping. Her hand found the call button once more. Rebecca appeared almost instantly, not to help, but to extinguish hope. "What do you need now?" Alyssa met her eyes squarely, her voice low and firm. "I need water. I am entitled to assistance. I am in pain. I am showing signs of early labor." Rebecca inhaled, as if insulted by Alyssa's audacity to request care. "I already told you. Procedures. Everyone must follow them." Alyssa felt a chill run down her spine, not from the air conditioning, but from the way the woman said the word everyone. It did not include her. It never had. The next contraction hit like a fist. Instinct to protect her child forced Alyssa to push herself up from her seat. Slowly, painfully, but necessarily. "I need to go to the restroom." Rebecca stepped forward, blocking her path like a living barricade. "The seatbelt sign is on. I need to go now." "You are not permitted." Rebecca's voice dropped into a lower, poisonous register. "You people always want to do whatever you want." Each word hit like metal. Daniel shot to his feet behind her. 2 passengers turned to look, but no one intervened. No one spoke. No one was willing to trade their comfort for doing what was right. Daniel's camera began recording, capturing the moment Rebecca stepped closer, capturing the moment the air tightened into a line, capturing the moment every eye in first class centered on a single point, the moment before the storm. Alyssa drew a strong breath, arms wrapped around her belly, her eyes never leaving Rebecca. "I will not sit down until you do your job." A sharp crack split the air like a gunshot. Alyssa did not even see the hand swing. She only felt the force of the slap, sending her head to the side. The cabin fell silent. A horrifying, absolute silence. Daniel pressed the shutter again and again and again. The camera did not miss a thing. Alyssa stood, frozen, her hand on her burning cheek tears, gathering not from pain, but from the shock, the disbelief that this had actually happened. In first class, in seat 2A, that she had rightfully purchased. While she was pregnant, while she needed just a glass of water, Rebecca stepped back, but there was no shame in her eyes. "You just threatened me," she declared loudly for the entire cabin to hear. "I will be reporting that you assaulted me." And in that moment, Alyssa understood more clearly than ever, this was no longer about attitude or service. This was an attack, a lie, a mechanism of power working exactly as it had been built to. But what no one in that cabin knew was that the moment Rebecca raised her hand, her career in aviation ended. because the woman she had just humiliated on this first-class flight had a husband who owned more than 70% of North Star Airlines. And once he found out what happened, Rebecca's entire world would collapse. In the moment after the slap, it felt as if all the oxygen had been pulled out of first class. No one breathed, no one moved. No one dared touch the fragile line between the truth and the lie Rebecca had just created. Alyssa stood there with one hand pressed to her burning cheek and the other protectively wrapped around her belly, shielding the only thing in the world she could not allow to be harmed. Inside her chest, her heartbeat pounded so hard she felt as if the entire cabin could hear it. But Rebecca looked at her, as though she were the problem, the danger, the unwelcome intruder in this bright, polished world the attendant believed belonged only to people like herself. "I need you to sit down immediately," Rebecca said, her voice louder, sharper, already rewriting the story from the very first second. Alyssa slowly turned her face back. She did not cry. She did not back away. She simply looked at Rebecca with a gaze that forced the entire cabin to swallow their own silence. "You just slapped me," Alyssa said. "I am pregnant. I am in pain. I need water. I need medical assistance." Her voice did not shake, did not crack. It was sharp like the edge of glass, leaving a mark that could not be denied. Rebecca stepped closer. "You stood up in defiance of the crew. That is dangerous to the flight." "I stood up because you ignored every request I made for more than 1 hour," Alyssa replied, her abdomen tightening again with a stabbing wave that forced her to take a long breath. "I stood up to protect my baby." But Rebecca didn't listen. Or she chose not to listen. Some people do not need reasons. They only need power. Daniel raised his camera, higher lens pointed directly at Rebecca. He said nothing, but his eyes said it all. "I am recording every second." And that was what made Rebecca falter. She glanced toward the camera, then quickly straightened her voice, shifting into performance. "You are raising your voice at me. I feel threatened." Alyssa almost laughed at the shamelessness, but the pain twisting through her abdomen forced her to grip the seat to stay upright. "I never threatened you. Your behavior is affecting the safety of this flight," Rebecca continued, as if reading from a familiar script she had used on many victims before. But this time, she did not know that script was about to become evidence against her. A sharp ding sounded through the intercom. The captain's voice came on steady but tense. "We are diverting to the nearest airport due to a situation in the cabin. Crew prepare for an emergency landing. A situation in the cabin." Not because Alyssa was ill. Not because someone was hurt, but because Rebecca had decided to fabricate a story that the pregnant woman was the threat. Every head in first class turned toward Alyssa, some with suspicion, some with fear, some just wanting to distance themselves from trouble, all of them wrong. Daniel broke the tension with a sentence, sharp as a bullet. "I have photos." The entire thing. She slapped her. Rebecca spun around, eyes narrowing like blades. "You have no right to film." "But I did," Daniel replied, "and I recorded everything." For a brief second, Rebecca stood frozen, exposed completely. She had lost control of the story. The polished mask of premium service she wore as armor had cracked. She grabbed her intercom device and barked into it, her voice punching through the cabin. "I need security as soon as we land." Alyssa exhaled sharply, not out of fear, but out of understanding. She was about to step into a fight where the entire system would stand on the wrong side. She held her belly, breathing through another tightening wave. Pain pressed deeper, but her eyes never left Rebecca, the figure trying to hide her violence behind the machinery of authority. Richard Coleman finally broke. He set down his laptop, stood halfway up, then sat again, afraid of Rebecca's glare, then sighed heavily. I saw, he whispered, but not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Shame rolled over him, a man who had every ability to speak up but chose silence. The cabin began preparing for landing. Alyssa eased back into her seat, fastening her belt eyes, fixed straight ahead. No trembling, no collapse, no retreat. The baby shifted inside her, as if responding. From behind, Daniel leaned forward and said quietly, "I am not going to let you face this alone." A simple sentence, but the only thing in that cabin that made Alyssa feel less alone. The plane descended, the landing gear lowered, and Rebecca Sloane's world prepared to hit bottom. Because what she didn't know was that the moment those wheels touched the runway, millions of phones would light up with the image of her raising her hand to strike a pregnant woman. And Alyssa's husband, Ethan Carter, just a few states away, would see that image before Rebecca could invent a single new lie. The storm had not begun. This was only the first gust of wind. The moment the wheels touched the runway, first class trembled with a soft shudder. But what waited on the other side was the real impact. Alyssa gripped her seatbelt tightly, her breath heavy as another contraction tightened around her abdomen like a ring of searing steel. But her eyes stayed open, sharp, fixed straight ahead, as if nothing could break the fragile composure she was clinging to with every ounce of strength she had left. Rebecca strode toward the cockpit, her voice slicing through the air like a blade, disruptive passenger. "Prepare to hand her over to security." The words spread through the cabin like poison, soaking into every passenger. Those who saw nothing, those who saw everything but pretended not to. Those who knew Rebecca was lying, but chose silence because they did not want to get involved. When the aircraft door opened, 3 security officers boarded their faces, expressionless, their eyes sweeping the cabin as if searching for a violent threat. Rebecca pointed directly at Alyssa. "Her!" Every head turned toward Alyssa. Instinctively, she placed her hand over her belly, shielding her child. Not because she feared they would touch her, but because she feared something deeper, that this system could reach into her life, twist the truth, and crush any attempt to resist. The lead officer, a broad man with a rigid stance, spoke in a cold, procedural tone. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." Alyssa met his gaze head-on. "I am pregnant. I was slapped. I need medical attention." Rebecca immediately inserted herself, her voice dripping with false victimhood. "She attacked me. I had to defend myself." Daniel shot to his feet as if staying seated a moment longer would suffocate him. "No. I have photos. She was hit. She only stood up because she was in pain." The officer turned to Daniel, but cut him off before he could say more. "Sit down. Do not interfere." Daniel's grip tightened on his camera. His breath shook with anger at being silenced. Another officer approached Alyssa, confiscating her bag and taking her phone. "I need that," Alyssa said, reaching out. "I need to call my husband." After questioning, the officer replied without looking at her, his tone so devoid of humanity it seemed to chill the room. They escorted her off the plane like a criminal. No wheelchair, no medical assistance. Just 2 officers flanking a 7-month pregnant woman down a cold metal staircase. Alyssa moved slowly, painfully, but she held her spine straight. She did not cry. She did not plead. She did not give Rebecca the satisfaction of seeing her break. Nearly the entire first-class cabin watched from the doorway, some with judgment, some with pity, some with morbid curiosity, but none with courage, except Daniel. He was forced to stay behind, but the look he gave Alyssa before she disappeared was the look of someone who understood that truth only survives when someone protects it. The door to the security zone shut behind her, sealing Alyssa away from every witness. They led her down a service staircase and out to the Special Operations Vehicle bay. Cold wind whipped across her face. Another contraction hit harder, making her stumble, but the officer only said, "Move faster." The security van door slammed shut, a cramped space, harsh white neon lighting metal walls closing in. Alyssa tried to breathe deeply, one hand on her belly, the other braced on her thigh to steady her mind. They are trying to turn me into the offender. They want to own the story before the truth reaches the outside. But what these men in their small, insignificant security van did not know was that the story had already escaped them, and it was spreading like a tidal wave through every device outside those walls. When the van stopped, they led Alyssa into a small square room with no windows, only a metal table and 4 cold walls designed to break a person's spirit. The lead officer said, "We will ask you a few questions. I need a doctor." Alyssa replied, her voice low but razor-sharp. "And I have the right to make a phone call." "You can do that after questioning." Alyssa did not blink. "I have not been charged with anything. You are unlawfully holding my phone. I am an attorney. I know my rights." The room seemed to tremble, as if someone had thrown a stone into a still pond. But they didn't back down. Not men like this. Not systems like this. The door opened. A man stepped inside. His suit was wrinkled at the shoulders from rushing his expression, worried but attempting to look authoritative. "I am Thomas Green, Vice President of Customer Services for North Star Airlines." Alyssa looked at him, the way she would look at another version of Rebecca authority, wrapped in polished pretense. "We are reviewing the incident. According to the statement from the lead flight attendant, I was slapped Alyssa Cuttin, refusing to let him finish the script, in first class, while pregnant, while asking for help. Ms. Sloan said you stood up in a dangerous." Alyssa let out a short laugh, sharp, cold, not a trace of humor. Dangerous is her ignoring me for more than an hour while I was experiencing signs of preterm labor. Thomas blinked, a brief hesitation, a crack in the mask. But he stayed on message. "We will follow company procedures." "Company procedures?" Alyssa locked eyes with him. "Do your procedures include allowing your staff to hit pregnant women?" Thomas did not answer. Could not answer. Another contraction slammed through her, forcing her to brace herself on the table, but her voice did not lose its edge. "I need a doctor. Now." Before Thomas could respond, the door burst open again. A woman's voice cut through the air, sharp and unmistakably authoritative. Why has she not received a medical attention? Officer Maria Rodriguez entered her eyes, sweeping the room in one swift assessment. She was 7 months pregnant. She is clearly in pain. She turned to Thomas, her voice slicing clean. "Are you planning to let your airline be sued for neglecting a pregnant passenger?" Thomas froze. No response. No defense. No authority left. Everything shifted in that moment when one person inside the system chose to do what was right. But before Alyssa could take a relieved breath, a cold realization slid across her mind. Ethan still does not know. And when he finds out, none of them will keep their jobs. The door to the security room closed. after Maria Rodriguez issued the order to call a doctor, and in that instant a heavy silence settled over the room, like a layer of colorless smoke. Alyssa braced one hand against the cold metal table, her breath fractured by each tightening wave of pain, yet her eyes remained sharp as a freshly honed blade locked onto the face of Thomas Green as his confidence steadily crumbled. He stood there with clenched fists, the collar of his shirt creased and damp with sweat, trying and failing to project authority. He was a man accustomed to delivering cheap apologies through a hotline script, not facing the truth in person. And the truth now stood before him, undeniable, a pregnant woman struck, ignored, and treated like a criminal. Maria turned back toward him, her gaze unflinching. "You are not permitted to delay medical assistance for another minute." Thomas struggled to form a sentence. "We only wanted to ensure safety." Safety, Alyssa said, her voice low, but so sharp the entire room seemed to stop. "Safety is the one thing I never had from the moment I stepped onto your plane." Maria's eyes drilled into Thomas. "The doctor is on the way, and I will be noting in my report that your airline delayed care for a pregnant passenger." Thomas opened his mouth to protest, but one look from Maria forced the words back down his throat. He stepped toward the door, desperate to escape into the hallway, but before he could leave, the door swung open. Rebecca Sloane entered. Gone was the aggression from the plane. Gone was the confident posture of someone who felt untouchable in first class. In its place was a carefully crafted look of fragility mascara, smudged just enough to seem accidental, her hair slightly disheveled, as if she had survived a struggle. "I cannot be near her," Rebecca said, her voice trembling with rehearsed fear. One hand pressed dramatically to her chest, as though her heart were pounding too hard from shock. "I am still shaken. She threatened me." Alyssa turned her head slowly, a small movement, but enough to make Rebecca back up half a step. "You slapped me," Alyssa said, each word landing with the weight of stone. "And I have a witness. Daniel." The image of him lifting his camera and capturing multiple shots in rapid succession flashed through her mind. There was no flash, but the truth had never been brighter. Rebecca swallowed hard, then slipped back into her familiar performance. She stood up, approached me. I only defended myself. I followed my training protocol. Maria let out a short, cutting laugh that split the tension in the room. "I have read your training manual. There is not a single line in it that allows striking a pregnant woman." Rebecca opened her mouth again, but Thomas rushed to intervene, his voice low and urgent. "Rebecca, we will handle this internally. Step outside. I want to explain the truth." Rebecca snapped, terrified that if she left this room, she would lose control of the story forever. What she did not understand was that she had lost that control the moment her hand touched Alyssa's cheek. Rebecca inhaled sharply, her eyes sliding toward Alyssa, then shifting into the familiar look of disdain. "I know your type, always trying to create problems, always wanting special treatment, always." "You should stop that sentence right now," Maria said, her voice steel. "Because if I hear one more trace of racial bias in your words, I will be adding it to my report." Thomas tightened his grip on his briefcase until his knuckles whitened. He understood Maria was not bluffing. Rebecca swallowed hard, forcing down her anger, and fell silent. That was when the door opened again. Not the doctor. Not airline personnel. A younger officer entered, face tense. "We have a problem," he said. "Social media is exploding. The photos, they are everywhere." Thomas snapped around as if someone had slapped him. "What photos?" The officer held out his phone. On the screen was an image so clear it seemed to carry sound. Rebecca's hand mid-swing, Alyssa's face whipped to the side, a red mark blooming across her pregnant skin. Thomas went pale. Rebecca's mouth fell open. Maria nodded slowly, confirming the truth they had all feared. "Who posted it?" Thomas asked, his voice strangled. "A man named Daniel Brooks, a press photographer who covers social issues. The post has been shared tens of thousands of times in just a few minutes." The room went silent. A different kind of silence. Not the silence of waiting. Not the silence of fear. The silence of a system realizing that every wall it built to suppress, distort, and hide the truth had just collapsed with a single shutter click. Thomas turned to Alyssa, and for the first time, his eyes no longer carried superiority, only panic. We will review the entire situation." "No," Alyssa said. "You will follow the truth." "And where is the doctor?" At that moment, the doctor entered with 2 medical staff. Maria motioned them toward Alyssa. But before they could reach her, Rebecca's face went ashen when another alert appeared on the officer's phone. "What now?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling. The officer looked straight at Rebecca. "A man named Ethan Carter has contacted Airline operations. He is requesting a full report of the incident. He says he is the new owner of North Star Airlines." The room fell into an even deeper silence. Rebecca froze, unable to continue her performance. Thomas stepped back, mouth open, but unable to form words. Maria looked at Alyssa with an expression that understood exactly what had just shifted. Alyssa closed her eyes for one breath. Not relief. Not victory. Just truth returning to its rightful place. Ethan knows. And when Ethan arrives at this airport, none of them will walk away untouched. The medical staff pushed the gurney closer, but Alyssa remained seated upright, one hand on her belly, and the other braced against the metal table to hold on to the last threads of clarity the pain kept tearing away. No one in the room spoke. No one dared breathe too loudly. Everyone was being bent under the weight of a truth that had just struck like a direct blow. The husband they had worked so hard to keep her away from was the very man who held the highest authority over the system they had used to crush her. Thomas Green dropped into a chair, as if his legs could no longer hold him. His breath came in short bursts, sweat pooling on his forehead, his eyes hollow as the realization hit him that he was not standing beside a scandal, but at the epicenter of an event that would stain the history of aviation. Rebecca Sloane stood frozen lips, trembling, her eyes darting frantically in every direction, searching for an escape route that did not exist. The uniform she once believed made her untouchable now felt like a prison garment, exposing her to the harsh truth she had struck the wrong person, targeted the wrong person, and abused power against the wrong person at the exact moment the entire world was watching. Maria Rodriguez looked at the unfolding chaos with an expression that held no surprise. In her years working security at the airport, she had seen plenty of people fall apart in rooms like this, but never had she seen anyone collapse as quickly as Rebecca and Thomas, 2 people who once believed the system would always protect them. She turned to Alyssa. "Ms. Carter, the doctor, is here. You need to be examined immediately." Alyssa nodded, but when the doctor reached out to help her stand, she raised a hand to stop him. She stood on her own. A simple movement, yet. When Alyssa rose, the room seemed to recoil under an invisible pressure. A woman 7 months pregnant in pain, humiliated, treated like a criminal, and still she stood tall, not bowing, not trembling, refusing to let anyone who had tried to break her see even a crack in her strength. Rebecca could not bear the sight. "You do not understand," she burst out, her voice warped. I did not know who you were." If I had known, Alyssa turned her head, her gaze cold as steel. "That is the problem. You should not need to know who I am to treat me with basic decency. I am a passenger, a human being, a pregnant woman, and you slapped me as if I had no worth at all." Her words hit the room like heavy stones. Maria tilted her head and took one step forward, placing herself between them, not to stop Alyssa, but to mark the moral line Rebecca had crossed. Alyssa continued, her voice steady, not raised, not shaking, but strong enough to make Thomas stare at the floor. "You are not sorry for what you did. You are only sorry you did it to the wrong person." Rebecca opened her mouth, ready to deny it, but no sound came. A young officer standing by the door received another call. He lifted the phone to his ear, listened briefly, then looked around the room, his face draining of color. "The motorcade has arrived." Thomas shot to his feet, as if electrified. "Who is here?" The officer met his eyes. "Ethan Carter, and he is requested to meet every person involved." A wave of stillness swept through the room like a deep bass note rumbling through the floor. Rebecca collapsed inward. She stepped back, her hand groping for the wall, her nails scraping the paint as if she could claw her way out of what was coming. No, he cannot. I did not mean." Thomas moved closer to her, but only to keep his distance, not to protect her. He already knew he was not safe either. Maria stepped beside Alyssa, her voice lower but unwavering. "Ms. Carter, I will escort you to the medical wing immediately, and I will remain with you until the doctor confirms your condition and the baby's." Alyssa nodded. "Thank you." 2 simple words, but 2 words Rebecca would never hear again from anyone after today. As Alyssa was guided out of the room, her steps slow but firm, she walked as though the ground beneath her had been torn free from the lies that once covered it. Out in the hallway, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in quick, decisive rhythm. A line of people in black suits and airport operations staff stood rigid, their faces so tense they looked ready to crack. At the end of the hallway, a figure approached, and even without seeing his expression, clearly one could feel the force of a fury held in disciplined restraint. Ethan Carter. No one in the hallway spoke. No one lifted their head. No one even dared breathe too deeply. And when Ethan's eyes fixed on the spot where his wife had been escorted moments earlier, that gaze froze the entire corridor in place. Inside the room, Rebecca Sloane, still trembling, heard those approaching footsteps growing closer, and she understood that everything that had happened from takeoff until now was only the beginning. The rest of the storm was coming straight for her, and nothing in this world could save her now. Ethan Carter appeared at the end of the hallway, like a blade drawn from its sheath, sharp, direct, and without slowing for even a heartbeat. No one managed to greet him. No one dared step in his path. Airport security officers pressed themselves flat against the walls, leaving a clear passageway that even the air seemed to move aside for. Alyssa had just been lifted onto the gurney, yet she kept her upper body straight, her eyes fixed on Ethan, not in search of rescue, but as confirmation of a single truth: he had arrived, and everything was about to change. Ethan reached her side, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a touch gentle, yet carrying the gravity of a man holding back a storm with sheer discipline. "Are you all right?" His voice was low and deep, every word weighted with the fury he was containing behind steel resolve. Alyssa nodded. "The baby is fine. I just need monitoring." Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead a touch soft and brief. Then he straightened. The warmth of a husband vanished. In its place came the glacial precision of a man who owned 71% of an airline and had just discovered that his wife had been humiliated by his own employees. "Who is in charge of this area?" His voice cut through the hallway, like thunder forced into a single line. An airport supervisor hurried forward, face pale. "I'm overseeing the scene." "Good." Ethan gave him less than a second of attention. "Take me to the room where they are holding the flight attendant." The supervisor glanced at the security team, as if searching for backup. But they too looked at Ethan with the same expression one would give the superior of every superior. Because that was exactly who he was, they led the way. Ethan walked behind them, his strides steady and powerful, not rushed yet, forcing everyone else to jog just to keep up. Those steps were not simply carrying him toward Rebecca Sloane. They were the steps of a man walking into the center of a system that had abused its authority and preparing to rip it up from the foundations. The interrogation room door opened. Thomas Green shot up from his chair as if jolted by electricity. "Mr. Carter, Ethan didn't look at him. Not a word. Not a breath. Not even a glance. His eyes went straight to Rebecca. She stood, gripping the edge of the table, eyes, red cheek twitching. She was not afraid of security, not afraid of the airline, not afraid of disciplinary action, but she was terrified of the man now standing before her. "You are Rebecca Sloane?" Ethan asked, his voice calm in a way that made the room colder. "Why, yes." Ethan stepped closer. One step, enough to make Rebecca recoil instinctively. "You are the one who slapped my wife." Rebecca swallowed hard, her hands trembling. "I did not know she was... I did not ask if you knew who she was," Ethan said. "I asked if you hit my wife." Rebecca could only breathe heavily. She could not speak. Maria Rodriguez stepped forward, her tone even and sharp. "I am a direct witness to the aftermath, and I confirm the passenger was struck." Ethan looked at Maria for 1 second, then gave a slight nod, acknowledging her with quiet respect. Then his eyes returned to Rebecca, now stripped of any remaining warmth. "Effective immediately, you are suspended. Your system access is revoked. Your employee credentials will be confiscated." Thomas tried to interject. "Mr. Carter, we can resolve this through proced." Ethan turned his head slowly. The look he gave Thomas froze him like stone. "Procedure," Ethan said. "Your procedure just tried to turn a pregnant woman into a criminal." Thomas opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan stepped directly in front of him. "You are terminated. Effective now." Thomas went pale, as if the blood had been drained out of him. I have overseen customer service for 10 years, and that is exactly why today is not an accident," Ethan said. "It is the culture you helped create." A security officer appeared at the doorway. "Sir, apologies, but the press is gathering in the main concourse. They are asking about the condition of the assaulted passenger." Ethan did not appear shaken, not angrier, not unsettled. He simply turned his head, looking toward the medical wing where Alyssa had been taken, and the silent, controlled rage in his eyes made everyone in the room shiver. "I will handle the press later," Ethan said. "But first, I want full statements from every witness on that flight. I want the complete cabin data, and I want every complaint ever filed against Rebecca Sloane in the past 20 years. Rebecca broke down for real this time. "Please, I did not mean..." if I had known she was Con Ethan, cut her off with a sentence that was not loud, but fell like a verdict. If my wife were anyone else, you still would have slapped her. Rebecca's breath caught. Ethan looked straight at her, giving her one final look, the kind reserved for someone for whom judgment had already been passed. Your career ended the moment you raised your hand. He turned and walked out without looking back. And in that moment, Rebecca understood that she had struck the wrong person, but more importantly, she had struck someone inside a system, undergoing transformation, and she was the first part of that system to be removed. At the end of the hallway, Alyssa's gurney turned the corner. Ethan quickened his steps to follow. He did not need to speak. He did not need to ask any more questions. But every employee present understood one truth from the moment Ethan stepped into that airport. North Star Airlines ceased to be the airline they once knew. And when he took Alyssa's hand again in the medical bay, every first-class cabin, every cockpit, every interrogation room, every executive office would be forced to face a truth that surged toward them like a tidal wave. No one in that system would ever again be allowed to touch his wife or any passenger the way Rebecca had. Never again. Alyssa lay on the hospital bed, the monitor strapped across her belly, echoing the steady heartbeat of the child inside her, each small beep enough to hold her together after the chaos that had swallowed her entire day. The quiet white room, the soft lights, the faint scent of alcohol in the air stood in complete contrast to that first-class cabin, filled with poisonous stares, to that cold security room where they tried to turn her into a troublemaker. But in this stillness, the real pain finally began to seep in. She lay there with one hand resting on her belly, the other gripping the edge of the bedsheet, her palm still burning from where she had held herself together through fear, anger, and humiliation inside a windowless room. All of this over a simple request for water. The door opened softly. Maria Rodriguez entered first. Her expression eased when she saw Alyssa awake. "Your baby is fine," Maria said. The doctor confirmed it is not real labor, just contractions from stress. Alyssa nodded, her eyes glossy, but refusing to let any tear fall. "Thank you for being there," she said, her voice small but heavy. "If it hadn't been for you," Maria shook her head. "I didn't do anything special. I just did what was right. I only wish others thought the same." There was exhaustion in her tone, a hint of bitterness, the truth of someone who had seen this system fail too many times. Before Alyssa could respond, a figure appeared behind Maria, tall, strong, carrying a silent decisiveness. Ethan. Not the furious Ethan from the interrogation room, not the razor-edged CEO who had fired 2 people within minutes. This was her Ethan, the man who saw her before he saw anything else. In an instant, the coldness vanished from his face. He moved quickly to the bed. Alyssa sat up. Ethan leaned down and wrapped her in his arms, a tight embrace, not forceful, but absolutely unbreakable. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan placed his hand on her belly, as if making sure their child was truly safe. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice hoarse and low, trembling from restraint. "I should have been there. I should have protected you." Alyssa shook her head, resting her forehead against his chest. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault." Ethan froze for half a second, then tightened his hold on her shoulders. "But it is my responsibility, and I will handle it." Maria cleared her throat gently, reminding them she was still in the room. "I'll let you 2 talk. I'll return later to finish the report and help with anything you need. Mrs. Carter. She left, closing the door softly. The room was quiet again, just the two of them. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. Alyssa touched his hand, their fingers intertwining the way they always did when they needed to hold on to each other through a storm. "Did you see the photos?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I saw every single one, and every comment, and every witness statement, and every report." He looked up, his dark eyes hardening. It wasn't loud anger. It was the deep, dangerous kind from a man who had the power to change an entire system. "You were hit," he said quietly. "You were humiliated. You were dragged off a plane like a criminal. You were locked in a room. They took your phone." Each sentence was a blade, but he wasn't saying it to hurt her. He was carving every detail into his mind to ensure none of it would ever be ignored. And Ethan continued, "The worst part is that they believed they could do all of that without anyone finding out, without anyone being punished, without anyone being held responsible." Alyssa held his gaze. "But now they know." Ethan nodded slowly. "They know." Then he reached for his phone, not to show her the news, not to look at social media, but to open an email. An email he had sent just before walking into the room. "This is the order summoning the North Star Executive Board," he said. 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, everyone present." No exceptions. Alyssa narrowed her eyes. "What are you planning to do?" Ethan set the phone aside, still holding her hand. "Replace the entire system." Alyssa exhaled sharply. Not in shock, not in disbelief, but because she finally realized this was bigger than her, bigger than Ethan, bigger than the company. This was the moment when injustice had been fully exposed, and the one man with the power to change it had decided to act. The door opened again. Daniel Brooks. He stood quietly at the doorway camera, still hanging from his shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I just wanted to let you know the post has passed 10 million views." Alyssa looked at him. For the first time all day, she felt truth standing firmly beside her. Daniel walked closer. "I'll provide all the original photos to your lawyer," he said. "No edits, no cuts, everything." Ethan nodded. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Daniel replied. "Thank her. If she hadn't stood up for herself, I wouldn't have captured anything." Daniel left. The door closed. Alyssa leaned back against the pillow. Ethan never let go of her hand. And in that quiet hospital room, not on the plane, not in the interrogation room, but in the moment they looked at each other, and both understood this wasn't ending here. Something irreversible shifted. Not just the fate of one flight attendant, not just the future of an airline, but the entire structure of power culture and how people treat one another in the place society likes to call the most civilized environment in the world. Alyssa closed her eyes and breathed out, and in that fragile moment of silence, the baby in her belly kicked gently, as if agreeing, as if confirming, as if declaring that everything happening now was necessary, and the door to the future was opening, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever been forced into silence. Ethan stood at the doorway of the hospital room, his hand resting on the cold stainless steel handle, but not turning it. He drew in a long breath, forcing himself to contain the surge of anger still rushing through every vein. The only thing keeping him steady was the image of Alyssa lying on the bed, her belly round and full, the steady heartbeat of their child echoing through the monitor. She was safe. Their baby was safe. But that safety did not come from the system. It existed in spite of the system. He stepped inside, and Alyssa immediately recognized the shift in his eyes. The panic was gone. The sting of betrayal was gone. What remained was the sharp clarity of a man who had reached a point of no return. "Are they panicking out there?" Alyssa asked, her voice half calm and half bitter. Ethan sat beside her. Enough to be losing control. Alyssa nodded gently, then stared up at the ceiling, where the light cast a soft glow. In that moment, she was no longer the victim of the ordeal she had endured. She was an attorney, evaluating, analyzing, measuring every part of what had happened. "What are you going to do?" Ethan did not answer immediately. He clasped his hands together on his knees, then spoke slowly. "The pressure from the media is clearing the path. The public is on your side. They saw what happened. There is no way for the airline to hide this now." Alyssa closed her eyes briefly. "But this isn't just about me. It's about what created people like Rebecca." Ethan nodded. "I know. And that is exactly why I am going to fix it at the root." Alyssa opened her eyes and looked at him. "You're going to have to go against the entire system." Ethan held her gaze unwavering. "I own that system." A faint shiver passed through Alyssa's expression. Not out of surprise, but because she understood what was coming. This was no longer about firing a few people. This was a full reconstruction. At that moment, Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and read aloud, "The executive board has confirmed they will be present at 6 o'clock. CEO Price is flying to Nashville tonight." Alyssa exhaled slowly. "They're afraid of you now." Ethan looked at her, tilting his head slightly. "They should be. But not because I am the owner. Because they let their system harm an innocent woman. A pregnant woman." Alyssa gave a faint, wry smile. "I wasn't innocent. I fought back." Ethan touched her cheek where the mark from the slap had faded, but still lingered. "You fought back correctly." The door opened softly. Daniel Brooks stepped inside with his camera in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, quietly, "but I thought you both should know the video is out." Ethan stood straighter. "What video?" Daniel lifted the camera and played the clip. It wasn't his footage. A passenger from behind had captured the entire moment. Rebecca stepped forward and struck Alyssa. The sound was clear, and every word, every movement undeniable. Ethan watched the video without speaking. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened into something that made Daniel flinch. "Do you have the original file?" Ethan asked. "Yes." "And I've already sent it to Mrs. Carter's attorney." Ethan nodded once. "You did the right thing." Daniel looked at Alyssa. "I know this doesn't undo what you went through, but what you did today helped a lot of people." Alyssa said nothing, but her eyes softened, and Daniel understood. He left the room, closing the door behind him. The steady beeping of the fetal monitor filled the silence. Ethan turned back to Alyssa. "When this is over," he said, voice low but powerful, "they will never dare touch anyone like you again. Ever." Alyssa placed her hand over his. "I believe you." And in that moment, Ethan knew the fight that began in seat 2A was far from over. It had opened a new door. Behind that door was an entire aviation industry waiting to be cleaned from the inside out. And he would do it. Not just for his wife, but for every person who had ever been forced into silence. Alyssa woke after a short sleep, the glow from the monitor casting pale green streaks across the ceiling. It took her a few seconds to remember where she was no longer the suffocating airplane cabin, no longer the windowless interrogation room. This was a hospital. Safe, but not peaceful. Ethan was sitting in the chair beside her bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped head, lowered as if he were calculating 1,000 outcomes at once. He immediately looked up when she opened her eyes. "How do you feel?" Better Alyssa answered her voice, tired but steady again. "How's the baby?" Ethan nodded toward the screen. "Good." The heartbeat is steady. Alyssa exhaled gently, a kind of relief only a mother could understand. But when she looked at Ethan's tense face, the worry returned in a different form. Something else happened, didn't it? Ethan stood and walked to the window looking out at the airport. The airline is in an emergency meeting. CEO Price is asking to speak with me privately. The Department of Transportation is contacting us. National media is everywhere in the lobby. Alyssa stilled. Just hours earlier, she had been dragged off a plane like a criminal. Now the entire aviation industry was shaking because of her. The feeling squeezed her chest, yet freed her at the same time. Ethan turned back. His eyes no longer held only the concern of a husband. They held the focus of a man standing in the center of a storm and directing its path. "Do you want to withdraw the investigation?" Alyssa looked at him, as if he had said the most impossible thing in the world. "No. This isn't just about me." Ethan nodded, as though he had been waiting for that answer. "I need you to stay strong a little longer. Because what's coming is bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than the airline." Alyssa gave a faint smile, even though her lips still hurt from the tension. "You're talking to a corporate attorney who has fought 3 multinational conglomerates." Ethan smiled, but it faded quickly when his phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen for a moment, then handed it to Alyssa. A new post from Daniel Brooks. Not a photo, a video. A passenger had recorded Rebecca screaming in Alyssa's face, then lifting her hand and slapping her. The voice of the person filming trembled, but was clear. "She's pregnant. What are you doing? 17 seconds. But 17 seconds were enough to burn down every lie Rebecca and Thomas had tried to build. Alyssa returned the phone, her throat tightening. There's no turning back now. Ethan sat beside her again and took her hands in his. "You're not alone." "I know." A soft knock sounded at the door. The woman who stepped in was Gabrielle Washington, the civil rights attorney Ethan had called. Her expression was sharp, her eyes taking in the situation in a single glance. "We have the video," Gabrielle said, "and 3 more witnesses have come forward, all confirming the same thing: the lead flight attendant was the aggressor." Alyssa nodded, her gaze becoming calm and focused, like a warrior preparing for battle. "When do we start?" Gabrielle set her folder on the table. "Right now." Alyssa looked at Ethan. Neither spoke. But in that moment, they both understood that what was beginning was no longer their personal fight. This was the moment Alyssa's pain transformed into the leverage needed to change an entire system. And when the baby inside her kicked gently, they both knew this fight was not only for today, it was for the generation that would come after. From the perspective of a social justice expert, Alyssa's story reveals an undeniable truth. Injustice never begins with a slap. It begins with the glances, the procedures twisted into weapons, the people who stay silent when they should speak up, and a system that allows those with power to freely step on those who are vulnerable. And just as injustice does not start with an explosion, change does not begin with a law or a grand meeting. It begins with one person willing to stand up, one witness brave enough to tell the truth, and one moment when the truth is exposed at exactly the right time. If this story made you think about how society treats its most vulnerable, Please like and subscribe to help spread the values that matter. And before you go, leave a comment with the words, "Stand up."